Good evening, everyone. So probably you can start now. And today we'll discuss about how the union and rank transformation works in Informatica. Like how can you translate rank and union in the form of a query? So basically, in this, so we are going to understand how you know heterogeneous testing will be done. So basically, if you are actually working with source database is one and the target database is different, or if your source is a database and the target is a file, so how are you going to proceed? So that we'll discuss. So what are the things that you'll understand in this is like how to use a union transformation and how to use a rank, how can we replace them, and we'll also check how the heterogeneous testing will be done, like in between the one flat file and a relational table or two flat files. So source is a flat file and the target is also a flat file, and one relational table is one database, another one relational table is from Oracle, and another from, let's say, Sybase or something. So how do you test it, or how the heterogeneous testing will be done, that we'll discuss. So basically in this example we are taking a source table as a source as a EMP table, which is part of so employee EMP table as a EMP table as a source, and we are loading the data into flat file. So it's basically the target is going to be the flat file. So in this example, what we are actually trying to understand is that this is used to find out the top 3 salaried employees and bottom 3 salaried employees. So how do you identify them and how do you combine that by using a union transformation? So basically what it is doing is you're calculating the top 3 salaries. I don't think it's based on the department. It's just that we are actually pulling it based upon the top 3 salaries in organization and bottom 3 salaries in organization, irrespective of the department. So whatever it is, and we are combining that by using a union transformation. What does a union does? It just works like your union all operator. It just combines the data from two groups and then load the data into target. So now let's try to prepare this query. So how it works? So basically the background about is that you just have to calculate the top 3 salaries and bottom 3 salaries and combine that by using the union transformation and compare the data. See, rank function we already seen, we have seen in the SQL how it works. Like when we have to calculate the top 3 salaries and all, we have used a rank function. So let's take a look at the structure of the employee table. So it's basically you have structure of sdbu.emp. So when you try to use it, so you have employee number, employee name, job, manager and everything, but we are interested in, I think you need only the employee name and the salary and what is their rank. That is what you require. So let's try to first write the query for top salaries and the bottom salaries. So let's say for extracting the top salary, see what are all of the columns that you want. Basically you need an employee name, salary and then the rank of an employee. So let's try to write a query. So it's basically it is coming from the EMP table. So you have sdbu.emp. So what is let's say you call it as E. So I call this as e.ename and e.sal. E.sal, I think it's not a salary, e.sal. Let's say you need a rank, you need to get the top 3 salaries, right? So we are not actually using any partition by clause here because we are not grouping the data using anything. I actually want the top 3 salaried employees in entire organization, not with respect to the department. So I'm not using anything. So since you require a top 3 salaries, so order by e dot sal, let's say you need to rank them in the descending order so that it can rank from the top. So now this will give you the rank according to it. So let's execute and see. So if you see that 5000 is the first rank, and if you look at the 2 and 2, this is the second rank, and it has skipped the third rank and it has gone to the fourth one, and then similarly it has given the remaining other things. So now this is for a top salaries, but out of these top salaries we are interested in only fetching the top 3. So how do you identify whether the mapping is fetching the top 3 or bottom 3? You can just go here, go to the properties. If you see the number of ranks will determine that how many number of ranks you are fetching. So to fetch the top 3 salaries, so let me just alias it as employee rank or something, employee rank. So out of which how many you want, like you are interested in only the, so let's call it as top rank. So this is for a top thing, and let me just use top dot ename comma top dot sal, and you also require a rank here. So top dot employee underscore rank, emp underscore rank. So it's basically, it is a top salary. They're actually fetching setting one flag that is equal to, flag is equal to top or bottom. So even that also you can verify. So which I call it as a top flag, top line. And out of this, how many you require? It's basically less than or equal to 3. So top dot employee rank is less than or equal to 3. So try to execute this. So you have a top 3 employees now. Similarly, you need to calculate the bottom 3 salaries. So this is for calculating top 3 salaries. Similarly, how do you calculate the bottom 3 salaries? So this is nothing but your bottom salary. Instead of order by salary descending, you need to use a ascending one. So just use the bottom salaries here, and this one is fine, and this is also okay. So you have, this is your bottom flag, and this is also a bottom flag. So try to execute and see now how many it will give you. So these are all the bottom 3 salaries. So it's basically you calculated the top 3 and bottom 3 salaries, and now how do you combine the data by using 3 of them? So it's basically, now after calculating the salaries here, they are combining using the union. See, whenever you have a union transformation in the mapping, always replace that by the union all operator. So union transformation in Informatica is equal to union all. So union all is something that which does not eliminate the duplicate records, right? So this is how it works. So now let's say if you have to combine this, so just use union all. See, when you're using union all, it's obviously the number of number of columns in the first and second query should be same, and number of data types of each column should be same, and all those things, right? So let me just fetch only one set of data. So even if you use star also, that will be fine. But how do you use it? Let's say if you call this as a complete SQ, and if you call this as SQ dot ename comma SQ dot salary, or SQ dot employee rank, employee rank, and you have something called as a SQ dot top flag or bottom flag, whatever. Like you can just call this as a flag and this also as a flag, and I call this as SQ dot flag. So let's try to see whether this source qualifier query holds good. Yeah, now this is fine, and we are able to fetch the top 3 salaries and the bottom 3 salaries. Now we need to verify the data what is written by this query with the data what is generated by the Informatica. So if you see, this is a flat file. So let me just run this workflow. Let it generate a file, and we'll just compare the data from the query with the file. So let's go to the workflow manager and generate the file for this, like how it works. And we have okay. So let me just go to the particular workflow. So this is a workflow which is loading the data into this, and let me just verify in which path it is actually generating the file into. So you have a, so this is a name of the file what it is generating, top bottom salary.txt, and this is in the target file directory. So let's try to run this workflow and see how it generates, and let's also observe the workflow completion. Right now when you go here, so this is, let me just get the previous runs. For some reason it's very slow. Okay, so let's verify that. And meanwhile, assuming that workflow is completed, let's verify the data in the server using WinSCP. If you're actually verifying this in your VM, so you need to go to this path. So for verifying the target file, so you need to go to this path, Informatica 9.5.1. Let's say in this you have server, under that you have a info shared. Let's say another one is your target file. So the file will be generated in this path. You can go and observe that. So let me just verify it in the Unix, either by using WinSCP or PuTTY. So just enter the host name here and enter the username and password what will be provided to you, right? So if you see that root, and this is a path, this path anyway you will receive it from your development team info shade, and you have target files. So this is a file which is generated by it, and it is, in fact, it's a the comma delimited, a tab delimited file. So this is which it is being loaded, and now the date file is being generated. I think it's generated today only, 10th December. So let me just now you have a data which is present here in the database, and the target data is present in the flat file. So best way to do this is you need to first export the data, either export the data or copy paste into an XLS. So in order to export, just right click on it, export, do XLS, and here let's say you need to provide the name of the file. So let's say this is your employee underscore rank dot XLS. So and I'm exporting it to this file, and click on next. So basically I'm exporting it to Excel file. So now the file is being exported. So let me just go to this one. So edit it. You have so basically how many number of rows, whatever you have. I mean, in modern XLS, like it can contain more than whatever the data. I mean, it's number of records is not limited, what I mean to say. So you have employee name and all these, and then you have a top flag first and then followed by the bottom flag. Now let's copy this data and paste it into XLS. So here you have this complete thing. So see, basically what happened is that everything is got into single row. So how can we break this? First of all, so you can go to data and text to columns. You can select the text to columns and it's a delimited one. So click on next. So instead of tab, you just select it as a space only. I'm not sure how it recognizes. Why employee name is not going? So let's consider is this text to columns. Yeah, for some reason still this is not coming properly because there is no space actually in between this. So that's why I'm doing it manually, but it may not be true in your real time. Okay, so and you have a bottom flag, so which it is there, and these are all your bottom flags. Okay, so if you look at it, so this is a data what it is present here, and now you need to compare the data returned from this with this. So it's basically how do you compare the data between this and this is like we are going to write the condition saying that, let's say this is your, so this is your condition. So I'm going to compare the condition saying that A2 is equal to F2 is equal to A2 or something. Anything is fine. So if you do this, okay, I think we are comparing it in a reverse way. So let me just try and redo it again. So I have to compare the employee rank with the employee rank. So this F2 is equal to C2. So this is true. And similarly, you can just go for all the other records. And next one, you need to compare the employee name. So how the employee name is going to be. So basically this is equal to this one, A2. So whether the employee name is true or not. So similarly, you can carry for all the other records. Next one is a salary. So you're going to compare H2 is equal to B2. Now, whether everything is matching or not, that you have to verify. Similarly, you need to check for this employee rank is equal to, no, employee rank is done, sorry. Flag, this flag is equal to this D2. So check whether it is true or false. So likewise, for each and every column, you have to compare with this is your source data, and which we have exported, right? So, and this is your target data, which we have actually got it from this one. So out of all these, like, you just need to verify whether everything is matching between this and or not. So most of the time we'll use XLS only to compare the data between the heterogeneous sources. So it's basically we'll compare accordingly and then verify it. So if anything is mismatch, definitely you can report it as a defect. But still there is a defect if you closely observe here. So if you see the salary, it has been providing as a decimals like 5000.0000, 3000.00, so which is like a defect only. But when you have actually copy pasted that option value into the XLS, it has basically trimmed that decimals, or it has truncated that decimals and then showing you. So that is a defect. Like, why it is actually appending the decimals when you have an integer number in the source, why it is appending. So that's a defect. So you can raise the defect saying that why it is appending the decimals. In Informatica, when you're working with Informatica as an ETL tool, so this kind of a things will appear, because the reason is that in the database we have something called as a number data type. The similar kind of a data type is a decimal in Informatica. So whenever a developers define that as a decimal, it will automatically append, it will automatically append the these things like decimals automatically to that. So you can closely observe for all the number columns. Most of the times it appends the decimal value. See, people might ask you like what kind of defects you actually experienced, or what are the regular defects that you actually find out in your ETL testing process. So this is one of the example which you can explain, like most of the times the decimal are padded with numbers are padded with the decimals. This is a most frequent issue which happens if the developers do not take care of it. If they take care and then converting that into an integer, then it will holds good. But if they are not doing it, so this is how the data will appear and you can verify it. So even the delimiter is working fine. Now you need to also know the count of records, how many are generated, what are the count of records that are written by your source query, and all those things which you have to verify in doing this. So this is like a example to work with the heterogeneous sources, that is your combining the data by using the two different transformations. So all of you know, like rank transformation is something that when you have a similar kind of a salary here, it has given the same rank. Even the way how the rank analytical function works in Oracle database, and even your this rank transformation also will work in the same way. So this is how you'll also be, this is how the rank and the union transformation works. So whenever you come across any of these transformations or an heterogeneous testing, so basically, so I'm just listing out the process when you have to work with the heterogeneous sources. First thing is that export the source data into a file, source data into an XLS. And if the target is file, that is fine. Like if your target is also a database, and export the target data also, data into an XLS, and compare the data. So if it is both the databases, compare the data between two XLS, between the two XLS, which it is there. And this is how it works. And if it is a flat file or something, it's two different databases, two heterogeneous databases. So first you need to write a source query. That is common. You need to write a source query, then export the data, whatever is written by the two heterogeneous databases. And if it is one flat file or something, it's again a common thing, like export the source data into an XLS. Anyway, target is a file, just compare the data between the XLS and the file is generated by this. So this is how you can work on the heterogeneous sources. So how to compare the data. So that's more about the rank and the union transformation to go with. Rank and the union, right? So if you have any questions, probably you can just quickly go ahead now, and we'll move on with the next example if you do not. Right. Okay. So the next one, which we can take a look at it, is like how to see. So far, we've actually verified the slowly changing. Staging tables, how the data is populated to the staging tables and everything. And in the next example, we are going to understand how a slowly changing dimensions will be tested. So basically, we are going to test the slowly changing dimensions. What it is. So how does a slowly changing dimensions works, or how the SCD type 1 works? This is very important in the testing process. See, if you recall a data flow diagram, what we have actually discussed in the previous classes, it's that first we are validating the data between the OLTP system and the staging area, right? So we have validated the data and we have completed that staging process testing. Now the data, whatever is present in the staging area, will be loaded into the warehouse. Warehouse is nothing but your EDW, enterprise data warehouse. So when you're moving it, you'll aggregate the data and then you'll load the data into dimension tables, fact tables and everything. So this is your staging database. So till this process we have tested it. How the data is present and all those things we have verified. Now we are loading the data into dimensions. Ultimately, dimensions and fact tables are used for reporting, not the dimensions and the fact table are used for a reporting, and the fact table. So now we need to test. So we understand during the data modeling or a dimension modeling, these dimensions are divided into 3 types, right? So we have a type 1, type 2 and type 3. So now here we'll understand how the type 1 data will appear and how the type 2 data will appear in the, and how the type 3 will look like, all those things. So looking at the data model itself, you'll be able to understand what is a slowly changing dimension type 1, type 2 and then the type 3. So let's try to see now how can we test this slowly changing dimension type 1. So basically we need to understand what is a type 1 first, then it is easy to test it. So SCD type 1, what does it says is that whenever a record is new, new means it is not existing in the target table, then we are going to insert that record. Whenever a record is existing, when record is existing and there is a change in attribute, in the sense there is some attribute which have been updated, there is a change in attribute, then we are going to update the existing record. We are going to update the existing record. So that's how you're going to verify whether the insert operation works or the update. Suppose let's take an example called as, let's take the same example what we are going to test. So we have something called as m underscore dim supplier 1, maybe m underscore SCD type 1, yeah, m underscore SCD type 1. So it's basically is reading the data from SCD input table, that is which contains the columns like supplier code, supplier name and supplier state. And these things you're checking it, and then this insert update logic will work. So it's basically how the data will be inserted and how the data will be updated. So whenever you see SCD type 1 mappings, you'll also observe the another type of transformation called as a update strategy transformation. It is just for flagging of the rows, either the record has to be inserted or updated. So that will be determined from this. Now let's try to take up the OLTP system itself. We'll take the OLTP table and understand how the data will be handled in the SCD type 1. So if you look at this, what are the columns that are there in the source? Supplier code, supplier name, and supplier state. Supplier code, supplier name, and you have a supplier state, which it is there. So if you look at the supplier code, it might be let's say ABC is a supplier and the supplier name is Acme Corp. So assume that this one, and the supplier state is NY, and you have another one, maybe WAL Walmart, and this is like, let's say NJ. So now let's say similar kind of a OLAP table also will be defined. So let's say OLAP table, you have something like this: supplier code, and you need to write a supplier name as well, and you'd like to have a supplier state, and along with this you'll also have a created date, last updated date, and everything. So when you are verifying the data, when you are verifying a record is existing or not, we'll always validate with respect to the supplier code. So we'll go and compare whether the ABC supplier is existing in the OLAP. If it is not existing or a new, so then we will insert the record. So is the ABC supplier is existing in the OLAP? No, it is not existing. So how do you validate it? So it's based on, you're going to compare the supplier code. Supplier code is a unique column, and you'll actually compare it with the input. Supplier input is nothing but ABC, and you'll go and compare with this. If the record is not existing, if the record is not existing here, so this will be there. So now let me just define, since the record is not existing, we have to insert it. So the supplier code is going to ABC, and you'll write it as Acme Car, and the supplier state is a New York. Similarly, this supplier is also not existing, so we are going to insert it. Whenever it is not there, we are going to insert. If it is available, we are going to update. Suppose, let's say over a time period of time, here the supplier is relocated from New York to, let's say, Texas. And how are you going to get updated? We'll always read the data from OLTP and load it into OLAP. So whenever you go and verify this ABC supplier, it says that it is already existing. Then we are going to update the attributes. Whether the supplier name is different? No, supplier name is same. Whether the supplier state is different? Yes, supplier state is different. So this record also will get updated to TX. So what is happening here is that whenever a record is getting updated in the OLTP system, you're going to update in the OLAP. Whenever a record is added in the OLTP system, you're going to add it. So it's basically, in SCD type 1, there will be no historical data, no history of information. Suppose if I want to understand, for a particular supplier code, do we have a historical data that is maintained? In the sense, what is a previous supplier state of ABC supplier code will not be able to track. So in SCD type 1 is something that it's just like an OLTP system. It will not track the historical data. It will have only the most recent data. No history, most recent data will be present in this. So whenever you are verifying the SCD type 1, so it's that each the data what is present in the OLTP system should match with the OLAP system. Should match. So whatever is present in the OLTP should be the same in the OLAP system to verify. So how do you handle how do you handle the SCD type 1 testing? So when you go for it, So whenever a record is new or it's getting added to the OLTP system, it should be the same in the OLAP. Whenever a record is getting updated, the same record should get updated in the OLAP system as well. So I hope this is clear, and if you understand this simple process, the testing is easy. Like basically we just have to understand, and we are going to verify the data accordingly. Now, in order to understand this example, we have a source table that is called as a SCD input, and the target table is going to be the target table, which it is going to be the DIM supplier 1. So this is your SCD type 1. This is input, and this is a SCD type 1, which will have most recent data. And the workflow mapping which it loads the data into this is m_scd type 1, and the workflow which you have is workflow_scd type 1. It should be m_scd type 1. So we'll try to understand how the SCD type 1 data will be tested. So it's basically, let's observe the workflow completion now for today, and tomorrow we'll start with the functional testing, as it is so important, SCD type 1 and SCD type 2, which you have to verify. For now, what I'll just show you is that whether the data is properly loaded into the first insert case. So if you see, this is your input, and if you go and see, you'll have a workflow that is your WF_SCD type 1. And it's true that you'll have a DIM supplier 1 as a output, and this is going to be this. So let me just run it. I don't think we have a data in the SCD type 1 table, so let me just query that select star from DIM supplier 1. So there is no data. So what does that mean if there is no data? When you run it, no record is existing. So all the records will be added to the database, right? So let me run this workflow and see. For the first time, I'm actually verifying the insert logic, how the insert logic works. There are two scenarios which you have to test. Whether the record is getting added to the target table whenever it is not available, and you also need to verify if the record is existing when there is a change in attribute, it is getting updated. So first we are verifying the insert logic for this, whether the data is getting added or not. So that when you start the workflow, so all the records should be added to the database. So now go and verify in this SCD type 1. So out of this, which you have 15, and 15 out of 15 records should be inserted because none of the records were existing before. So 15 out of 15 records have been inserted into this. Now we have seen the workflow completion. So we need to verify how the data works. See, in case of, you don't have much of the logics which are involved here, and it is just like a plain pull from the source to the target if you look at the mapping. So the count of records should match between the source and target in case of SCD type 1. Unless count of records should match when you are moving the input from SCD type 1 source table to the target table. So the count of records should match. So whatever the records that are there in the source should be same in the target. So let me just verify how many records we have in the source input. So let me just execute this and get the data. Okay, this is there in the SDBU schema. So run it something like this, SDBU dot this one. So when you try to execute, so this returns 15 rows. Definitely even in the target table should have a same number of records. In case of SCD type 2, you may not be able to match the count, but in case of SCD type 1, you should be able to match the count here. So DIM supplier 1, so which it is there. So try and execute. So 15. So 15 records and 15. So the count is matching between the source and target. You can also run the minus query between the source and target, because unless if there are no logical changes. So now let's say you need to validate the data between the SCD input and then this. So we're not testing the insert logic yet. I'm just validating the count and minus query. Then we'll go to the insert logic and all. So let me just find out the structure of the table, what are all the columns that we have, so that we can run a minus query here. So you have a supplier code, supplier code, supplier name, and then the supplier state. So you have something, supplier code, supplier name, and then let's say supplier state, which it is there. So we are running you can run the query in both the ways. You can run a source minus target and target minus source. Anything is fine. So it should match in case of both the cases. In case of SCD type 1, it should match. Minus, and what and all are the target. So let's say if you look at the target columns, we need to know the target columns, right? So let me just describe this. Target columns, dim supplier 1 to do this. So we have a here as well, you have a supplier code. So when you write it, select supplier code, and you have a supplier name, and you need to have a supplier state. From the target is going to be your dim supplier 1. So minus query, when you run for a SCD type 1, it should match. So run source minus target should match always. And also this is like a minus query which you are running from source to target. In case of SCD type 2, this cannot be matched. So we'll see what is the reason. And for that, you can also validate the target minus source. Target minus source also can be matched with this. Now, yeah, we can see that in the SCD type 2. So we have validated the count and then this, and next one which we have to start testing is about the null validation and all that is common. Like when you want to validate the null values, however is present, I mean, just like the other examples, you can validate. So most important thing about this one is like you need to validate the insert logic as well as a update logic in case of SCD slowly changing dimensions or a dimension tables. See, basically the insert logic means whenever you add a record to the source, the same record should get added to the database. Whenever you update the record in the source, it should get updated in the target. But basically what happens is that we will not be having access to the source database most of the time. In order to test the insert logic, we actually go in a reverse way. So see, we need to understand clearly here. See, whenever a record is added in the new record is added in the source system, the same record should get added in the SCD type 1. Whenever a record is getting updated, and the same record should get updated in the target table. But since most of the time we may not be having access to the source system, we do it in the reverse way. So what I'll do now is, let's say I'm actually going to delete a record from the target table to test the insert logic. If you have a privilege, if you do not have a privilege, then you need to wait for the data to be refreshed. We'll discuss about it. Let's understand first. So delete a record, any record you can take it, delete a record from a target table, which is present in the source, which is present in the source database, source table, or actually which is present in the source table. So how do you delete it? Let's say in our select star from when you say when you do it from the dim supplier 1, what I'll do is I'll actually delete a record from the so you have, let's say, something like SPA. I'll delete this supplier. So how do you do that? So delete from, and you write it as dim supplier 1, dim supplier 1, dim supplier 1, where supplier code, so basically supplier code is equal to SPA. So I'm deleting this supplier, and when you see this record is deleted, and commit the data. So now the same supplier is already existing in the source, right? So when I run for the next day, when the workflow runs, the record which is present in the source should get added to the target. That is what we are going to test. So in order to test the insert logic, I'm deleting a record from the target table which is present in the source. I'm sure that SPA is a record which is already available in the source. So let me run the workflow. Now see, if you have a privilege, you can run the workflow or wait for the next day, next run. So in the next run, at least it has to insert it. Now the record which we have deleted should get inserted. So one record is inserted. Now go and verify whether this record is present or not. So that you can run it again and see whether this record is added or not. So when you try and execute, so this is more like now it is added. And also when you see whenever a new record is created, so what you have to also verify is that both created date and the last updated date, created date and last updated date should be same. When you are verifying, the should be same. So when you are verifying for a insert logic, basically the created date and the last updated date should be same. That also you have to verify in case of a SCD type 1, SCD type 1 which you have. And the second one is about the update logic. So update logic is basically, in order to verify the update logic, I'm going to update a record in the target table, and for which the value is different in the source. So it's basically when you see for testing the update logic. So when I query this, so we know that for ABC supplier state is KA. So I'm going to update this supplier name and supplier state to some other value. Then when I rerun the job, this ABC supplier should get updated to the actual value. See, for this ABC supplier in the source, we have a supplier name as Bush and the supplier state as KA. I think it's true. So you can even verify that. For ABC supplier, what are the values in the source? Okay, so SDBU dot, let's say SCD underscore input, where if you look at it, where supplier code is equal to ABC. Supplier code is equal to ABC. So when you try and do this, so you have a Bosch and the Karnataka. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually updating the data in the target. So I'm updating the data in the target set. Let's say what are the values that you want to update. I want to update both supplier name as well as supplier state. Let me just update it. Supplier name is equal to some dummy. So I'm just giving some dummy names here, and dummy, and supplier state also I'll update it. So when I rerun the workflow, basically these values should get updated properly. So I'm also using a dummy this thing. So when you use a supplier code, let's say where supplier code is equal to ABC, I'm updating this value to the different one. So when you rerun the job, it should get updated with the proper data basically. So let me just update this. and commit the data. Basically, you have to commit it and wait for the next day run in case if you don't have a privilege. Since we have a privilege here, now I'm rerunning the job. So this record, whatever I have updated, that should get updated. See, one record is updated. Now go back and verify that record is properly updated. So now it should have been updated as a Bosch and then the supplier state as a KA, because that is a value which is present in your source. So which means if it gets updated properly, that means your insert and the update logic is working fine. So basically the second thing that you have to verify in this case is that your created date and the last updated date must be different, because it would have created around some 10th December, maybe 725, and I mean 720, sometime like that, and 726 this record should have been updated. So in case of a update logic, the created date and the last updated date must be different in this case. So this logic also has to be tested. And so in order to test the update logic, what we are actually trying to do is that we are update a record which is existing, update a record in the target table to some dummy values and wait for the next day run. You basically have to wait for the next day run and then verify the data whether it is getting updated or not. That you have to verify the create date logic and the update date logic. So that's how you have to verify the insert update operation in the SCD type 1. So that's how the data will be, created date and the last updated date. So that's how the data will be should be tested in case of an SCD type 1. And also to verify the duplicate logic, see, at any point of time, same record should not exist for multiple times. So you need to also verify the duplicates with respect to the unique column as well as all the columns. Both the things should be verified. So when you say what are all the columns that are existing there, so if you look at it, how you have to validate the duplicate records. So you need to validate the duplicate records for a primary key column, first of all, whether we have duplicates for a same supplier code, count of star. So in case of SCD type 1, you should not have a same, you should not have a same supplier code being repeated for multiple times. So in case of SCD type 1, so dim supplier 1, let's say you need to group the data, group by dim supplier code having count of star greater than 1. So try to execute this. So this gives you we don't have any duplicate with respect to that. And similarly, you have to also validate the duplicates with respect to all the columns. When I say all the columns, with respect to supplier code, supplier name, supplier state, and excluding the audit columns. Basically, excluding the audit columns, you have to verify supplier name, and you have a supplier state, which it is there, and you need to also verify the duplicate records in case of SCD type. So try to execute this and see whether this is getting updated. So now there are no duplicate records with respect to this one. So this is how you can validate the duplicate records, insert update logic, minus query, and the count validation between the source and the SCD for an SCD type 1. So this is more about the SCD type 1. So we will be probably discuss this in the first 10 minutes, and then I'll answer all your questions. Probably you can keep your questions open, and I'll answer all your questions, and in the next example we'll try to understand how a SCD type 2 works. Probably I'll just repeat it what we have discussed, since now there is no time to discuss about your questions. So we'll discuss again about this, and then later we'll go on with the next example, right? So this is how you validate the data between the SCD type 1. If you have any other questions related other than this, probably you can go ahead quickly and I'll try to answer them.
Karthik, we discussed about rank and the union function, right? So
Yes.
as a tester, what is the responsibility of that one? We have to verify that source and target would be, otherwise we have to look into that rank function and union and everything. What is the responsibility of that tester in that one?
Yeah, you have to verify end-to-end process. Whatever the examples that you take it up, you have to verify the end-to-end process. You need to understand what is the requirement and how the program is being developed, and you have to test it end-to-end. Okay then, thank you.